And welcome back. This week, we learned a woman who was hit by a freight train while in a police car has been awarded an $8.5 million settlement. Yareni Rios survived the collision back in September of 2022 with multiple broken bones, including a traumatic brain injury. Rios sued the towns of Platteville and Fort Lupton. We've learned an insurance policy for those two towns will be covering the cost of this settlement. Her attorneys say they needed to settle for this amount because the lawyers for the towns were actually using the insurance policy money for legal expenses, and that insurance policy was limited at $10 million.
By the time we got to mediation, they'd already spent $1 million defending the case. And so this takes the amount down. And essentially, my client ends up paying for the other side to fight her. And the harder you fight, the less money there is. I'm sitting looking at the case saying, we'd love to go to trial on this. But the problem is if I go to trial, by the time we go to trial, it's going to be 7 million, 6 million. If it gets appealed, it's going to be 5 million. And so at some point, you just have to do the right thing for your client.
And joining us right now is our 9 News legal analyst, Whitney Traylor, to talk about this case. Let's talk about the amount first. $8.5 million. These are two small towns. They don't have the tax revenue like Denver has. What do you think about this amount?
Well, I think it's reasonable. I mean, when you see this case, I'm surprised it could have been more. But understanding, as the attorney just said, the type of policy that it was, they have this Pac-Man clause. So essentially, the folks defending the company or the police departments, their fees are paid out of the insurance policy. So as he was saying, the more that they spend on defense, the less there is to be available. But here, I mean, this was a real tragedy because keep in mind, there's something called the single recovery principle. So she can only sue them once. That's all she can get. And so, she may have damages ongoing. I mean, this is going to be, she was in the car, in handcuffs, couldn't move, saw the train coming, was screaming. Those emotional damages would have been exorbitant. I mean, that was, I can't even imagine what she's going through, even now, after, the physical damages healed.
Yeah.
There's been a lot going on in this case, even prior to today, right? 2 officers in this case were ultimately convicted, lost their jobs.
Yeah.
How does that information play into mediation, coming to a settlement, negotiations? Does that matter?
Well, that might matter. Now, what happened there, though, might not have come in the civil trial. So if they went to trial, what happened to the police officers, they would have fought about that pre-trial and tried to keep that information out. But that's an important fact. But I think the facts themselves in the video are the strongest. I mean, imagine being on the jury and seeing that. Everybody could imagine what it would be like to be on the train track, seeing this train coming. So I think this was a really straightforward case in a lot of ways. I mean, when you're in police custody, they're responsible for your well-being. And so the negligence to park on the train track, I think that evidence, that video evidence, would have been really substantial at a jury trial.
So you heard her attorneys say that the town's attorneys here spent about $1 million on fees trying to fight this case, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, this is a straightforward case. There's video, they parked on the tracks, the officers were negligent here. Seems like a winner. Why would the town's attorney even bother to try to defend this case?
Well, I guess every case there is a defense, and it could be procedural. It could be on some substantive issues. Allegedly she was waving a gun and it was a potential road rage incident. How that would have came into play. Maybe they could have knocked down the damages and say, hey, she was partly responsible. I mean, that would have been a tough argument to make. But certainly when you're defending, people aren't just going to write a $10 million check every day. So they're still gonna fight in what the courts have tried to get away from this, where the discovery process is so expensive. And so what the defense lawyers were probably saying was, well, we need to do some defense. We need to take some depositions, talk to some experts. And attorney fees add up so quickly. So, yeah.
And you're talking about a public body, a city's insurance, not two private parties.
Oh, that's correct. And that's another thing. So the insurance paid here. And what's interesting is when you go to a jury trial or a trial, the jury doesn't know that insurance is paying it. Insurance is making the decisions. And the people who were sitting there, the police officers in this instance, aren't necessarily the ones making the decisions. So, and that's a fight that lawyers have all the time because they feel like if the jury knew it was an insurance company, they'd want to go after the
bid. They would ding them even more.
Exactly right.
Because of people's sentiments was with the insurance companies.
Exactly right.
Whitney Traylor,